I expect plenty of riders to be on the attack.
Flag drops, races on.
We're going for round 2 of the Tour Down Under interviews. I'll be talking about the Festival of Cycling, in fact, the Santos Festival of Cycling. And the second person to partake in these interviews with Ride Media is Stuart O'Grady, who's the event director for the men's racing. He's going to join me and we will talk about cycling, festivals, Adelaide, South Australia, bike racing, lots of different things. So stay tuned. Here he is. 1, 2, 3. Poof. Stuart O'Grady, it's great to see you.
G'day, Rob. How are you?
Very well. How are you?
Good.
I just had a chat with Hitaf Rashid. So we've talked about all of the UCI machinations and Tour Down Under retaining World Tour status and the beauty of South Australia and a whole host of other different topics.
Wow.
What do you reckon you and I should talk about?
Instead of talking about everything that everybody already knows about, how hard it's been, why don't we just talk about how cool this is going to be for the domestic teams and domestic riders? And
sounds like a plan. Like I remember when when last year's Tour Down Under was cancelled, I published a piece saying maybe this will be a little blessing in disguise. You know, just looking for growth in domestic competition. The NRS was, in a prosperous state for a little while, and then it just sort of went and plummeted for various reasons. And now it looks to be like it's in an upward trajectory.
Well, it's obviously pretty exciting for the national, domestic scene, and certainly a good way to kick off 2022. So,
do you want to give me a quick broad brushstrokes overview of what you've got in place for next January, which is actually only a couple of days away?
Once again, with the challenges of international travel and border restrictions and the pandemic, things have been extremely challenging. But out of all that, we've been able to work extremely hard behind the scenes and work on a domestic event again. But I guess it's a little bit more than your typical domestic race. We've got World Tour teams, obviously with Bike Exchange Jayco. We've got World Tour riders. And obviously, because of the last year, not many of the Australian riders actually decided to return home. It was just too risky with quarantine, and they weren't really sure if they were going to be able to get back to Europe and continue their season. So a lot of the guys and girls didn't actually come home in the off season, so the guys are just going to want to race. And the Tour Down Under team have been working extremely hard to deliver a Santos Festival of Cycling so that we can at least, I guess, really just launch into 2022. So the Summer of Cycling starts with the Bay Crits and then the Nationals, but then they'll be able to descend into Adelaide and we've got a pretty cool event prepared for not only the road racing, but for pretty much everybody that races or rides on two wheels, with mountain biking, track racing. We've got our Olympians, our Paralympians, cyclocross, BMX, and obviously the road racing for men's and women's. So it's a pretty exciting time.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the positives from last year, for example, we saw a good showdown on Old Wollonga Hill, as per usual. It was just not per usual, but at least it did yield one of the revelations of the season in Lucas Plapp, who went on to bigger and better things, and we can expect to see a lot more of him in the coming years. Richie still did his dancing up the hill. Things do evolve, and I guess all too well that the racing in South Australia can expose a young professional to some of the joys of world-class racing.
Yeah.
Is there some candidate this year who could sort of slot into doing what Plapp did last year, for example?
Well, hopefully. I mean, it was a fantastic opportunity. I mean, that's we've delivered them a stage to perform on. So I'm sure there's guys and girls around the country training their butts off today and every day in the build up to the Festival of Cycling, because there's an opportunity there. And if the guys and girls go out and deliver, the eyes of the cycling world really are watching Adelaide. I mean, there's no other no other road racing going on around the world at that time of the year. The scouts are out there watching. Your name pops up on the top of the page or anywhere near Ritchie Port at the finish of or closing of a stage up Wollonga Hill, and people are going to take notice. People are going to remember that name, and all of a sudden there's a scurry of teams fighting over their signature. Like we said, the opportunities are there. It could be a game changer. So we're doing. I mean, it's the same team. We've got a whole group of people working behind the scenes. The infrastructure still looks like the Tour Down Under. It looks like the big dance still. So the South Australian Tourism Commission have been good enough to invest a lot of time and money into delivering this event, which is fantastic.
The format of the Tour Down Under is one that everyone got pretty familiar with, and I think there were a lot of names of regions and towns that people like myself grew familiar with because of the bike race. Do you want to give a quick outline of where you're going and when? And I assume, without having examined the course, that celebrated sites like Old Wollonga Hill will be back on the itinerary. Is that right?
Well, yeah, it is. I did play around with that. I thought, there's always a great opportunity to explore different climbs and so on. But I think just in the environment we're in with COVID and restrictions, and I think a little bit of the consistency was good with Wollonga Hill. We know we're going to get an incredible race up there. Also, it's been a real balancing act, Rob, with designing these courses. As we saw last January, in normal circumstances in a World Tour event, the stage one would have been a bunch sprint. But obviously, the abilities are far and wide in the domestic race. There's some incredibly talented riders. There's also a lot of developing young talent and some old, experienced riders out there. So it's a real mixed bag. So we've got to be really careful in the course design not to make the stages too difficult at the start, so we don't have the peloton exploding. And I know that after the last event, the South Australian Police were really under the pump with resourcing the back of the race, trying to keep everyone safe. So at the end of the day, we've got to deliver the safest and best and most exciting event possible, and that's actually more challenging at a domestic level than a World Tour level. What you'll find and what the riders will discover is the first two stages, we're starting up on the top of the Adelaide Hills. So stage one is Stirling to Lobethal, starting up the top of the beautiful town of Stirling, descend our way through the Adelaide Hills, and then pretty quickly into the stage, we'll come into finish loops, we'll call them. Stage two is Mount Lofty to Woodside, so bringing into Mount Lofty into the race, which has never actually been a part of the Tour Down Under's history. I thought no better time than to start up next to the iconic lighthouse, which should look pretty cool for broadcasting. I know it's a real highlight for fans, for bike riders especially, to ride up to Mount Lofty. So, I hope to see as many people up there as possible. Again, work our way through the Adelaide Hills, finish in Woodside, where there is a small little climb a few K out from the finish. So it's a good little launch pad for those that feel that, that they're not going to beat Ritchie up Wollonga. It's a good opportunity to try and gain some seconds on him. That should be a really nail-biting finish, actually. I'm pretty pumped with that one. It's going to be exciting to see what happens. And then stage three, I've tried to keep a little bit of consistency with the event. You couldn't really not visit McLaren Vale. But taking in a slightly different start, which is going to pass Darrenberg Wineries, Chapel Hill, taking a little bit more of McLaren Vale before we do the usual loops along the coastline, which is the beautiful big money shot, which will be beamed around the world and make a lot of people sitting in cold Europe pretty jealous, seeing the beaches that time of year, and finishing up Wollonga.
Is there a stage four?
No, so we've got the women are racing 3 days of road racing. Then we've got on Australia Day criteriums at Vic Park. So, so the 26th will be Victoria Park criteriums, and then the men's race 27, 28, 29. The stages are relatively short as well. I've had to kind of scale them back in kind of forecasting hot weather. I really want the stages to be fast and exciting. I think that's the main thing we want to get out of this event. And kind of celebrating everything with two wheels. So if you love your track racing, you can go out and see our Tokyo Olympians and Paralympians out at the velodrome. And we've got the BMX, we've got mountain biking, cyclocross, pretty much everything, criteriums, road racing. So we just hope to see as many people in South Australia as possible. We've got Rowan Dennis coming home. He's after his bronze medal in Tokyo. We've got Richie Port coming home. He's just done 2 weeks of hard quarantine as well with his family. So, the guys have put in a big sacrifice to come home for these events. I've obviously got Bike Exchange, Jayco, who are supporting the race, being the only Aussie World Tour team. And then we've got all the women, which I'm sure I'll let you, Kim Leake, talk about that.
Given the fact that you're new as the race director, and I'm sure you had a couple of ambitious plans, had it been Tour Down Under the last couple of years, does this serve as a little blessing in disguise where you get to experiment with a little bit of gravel here or another climb there or Mount Lofty, or maybe we could even consider that there could be let's say a Norton Summit time trial where you don't need a TT bike per se. Are you looking at a little bit of innovation based on you get a litmus test with these domestic racing?
Yeah, look, I haven't. Of course, I've had plenty of time to prepare and think about it. That's for sure. Last 2 years give me lots of time to come up with some pretty interesting innovations for when we get back to World Tour status, and I've got a few pretty cool surprises in store, which we won't go into, obviously. But yeah, look, I think once the World Tour comes back, I want people to kind of be blown away. I want everyone to go home, riders, fans, at the end of every stage and go, wow, that was a really cool stage. Because obviously I know as a bike rider, I know the Adelaide Hills fairly well, as you can imagine. There's a lot of roads which we haven't raced through in the TDU, and a lot of places where we haven't really explored so much. So I'm not going to be too cruel. I'm not going to create a mini Paris-Roubaix or too much gravel. I think there's a time and a place for gravel, and that will come. But I think my first year as World Tour director, I want the race to be, I don't want it to come down to punctures or accidents on gravel sections. And I understand there's, it's okay to have a lot of gravel in Italy in March with Strada Bianca in, 10 to 15 degree heat. But, can you imagine putting on a gravel stage in Adelaide and it comes out to be 40 degrees? I don't think anybody would enjoy that too much. So look, it is a balancing act. You've got to take into account, every card that's in the pack. You can't just do something hit and miss on a World Tour event. So I've got some really cool ideas which I've had brewing for many, many years. Even when I was racing, I was thinking, one day if I ever did get the role, then I'd love to see this in the event. Looking forward to January and the Festival of Cycling as well. Hope to see you all here.
Thanks a lot, mate.
See ya. Bye-bye.